3. Highlight international pressure and unbiased witnesses. Noman continued, your families have reached out to your home governments, and they're applying pressure. I'll also bring in international representatives as character witnesses to vouch for your innocence and emphasize that you came here as tourists, not as criminals. 4. Create public support and media pressure. I've already contacted journalists and human rights organizations. I'll continue working with them to shed light on this case, revealing how the government is using you to gain public favor for the elections. Public opinion can be powerful. We'll try to turn it in your favor by exposing the truth. 5. File a motion to challenge the confessions. With the documented evidence of abuse, we'll file a motion to dismiss the so-called confessions on the basis of torture and coercion. This will be risky, as the judge is likely aligned with the government. But it will put the prosecution in a difficult position, forcing them to either prove the legitimacy of the confessions or admit to misconduct. 6. Appeal to international courts if necessary. If all else fails, I'll take your case to international human rights courts. We'll demand intervention based on the unfair trial process and the documented abuse you've endured. This could add more pressure on the government and make it harder for them to justify their actions. The friends' reaction and strengthened resolve. As Noman finished outlining his plan, Assad and his friends listened with renewed hope. Despite the overwhelming obstacles, they could see that Noman had a well-thought-out strategy. His dedication to their case reassured them, instilling a renewed sense of determination. Assad looked at Noman, his voice steady, but filled with gratitude. Thank you, Noman. We're ready to fight. Whatever it takes, we'll stand with you. Noman nodded, admiring their courage. Stay strong. Don't let the threats intimidate you, and remember that the truth is on our side. Together, we'll expose this injustice. The road ahead. With Noman's plan in place, the group prepared for the grueling battle ahead. Noman continued to work tirelessly, coordinating with his legal team, documenting the defendants' injuries, and building a network of support from human rights advocates and journalists. Despite the dangers surrounding him, Noman was resolved to see this case through. Every visit with Assad and his friends strengthened his conviction, making him more determined to uncover the truth. He knew that they were up against a powerful machine, but he also knew that their courage and resilience would serve as the foundation of their defense. As the days counted down to the trial, Haider, the families, and the friends themselves held on to the hope that justice could still be achieved. They were aware that the government would stop at nothing to maintain control, but with Noman by their side, they knew they had a fighting chance. With their spirits steeled, they braced themselves for the battle of a lifetime, each determined to reveal the truth, clear their names, and reclaim their freedom. Episode 10. Chasing Shadows. Haider's quest for the truth. Following his emotional visit with Assad and the other defendants, Haider found himself filled with a renewed determination to unearth the truth. Seeing the boys' physical and mental suffering left him with an unshakable feeling that this was no ordinary case. It was clear to him now that the setup had been meticulously planned, down to the smallest details. Each conversation with Noman and each memory from the day of the rally only strengthened his conviction that Assad and his friends had become pawns in a dangerous game. Noman had laid out a powerful legal strategy, but Haider felt that the case required more than just courtroom tactics. He decided to retrace the steps of that fateful day at the rally, determined to find the missing pieces of the puzzle. He knew that the juice stand where Assad had briefly left his backpack might hold crucial clues. He resolved to track down the juice seller, believing that this man could reveal something that would expose the truth. The search for the juice stand owner. Haider returned near Opera, the bustling area where the rally had taken place. He scanned the marketplace, searching for any trace of the mango juice stand that Assad had described. But to his surprise, the spot where the juice stand had been was now empty. The vendor was gone, and there was no sign of the stand or its equipment. Haider frowned, feeling an unsettling twinge of suspicion. He began to ask around, talking to other vendors and locals in the area. But each person he approached gave a different story. Some claimed they had never seen a mango juice stand in that location, while others said the man running it had disappeared suddenly. Frustrated, Hader pressed further, finally finding a vendor who offered a potential lead. His name was Afzal, the vendor said, leaning in conspiratorially. He used to live in the slum area in Islamabad near G8. But 2 weeks ago, he vanished. Some people say he died in an accident, but no one really knows for sure. This information struck Hader as odd. He couldn't shake the feeling that Afzal's sudden disappearance was connected to Assad's case. Thanking the vendor, Hader decided to pursue this lead, knowing that any small detail could help unravel the truth. Venturing into the slums of Islamabad, following the vendor's directions, Hader made his way to the slum area in Islamabad. The district was crowded and chaotic, a stark contrast to the city's more developed neighborhoods. As he walked through the narrow, dusty lanes, he observed the faces of the people living there, tired, worn, but filled with resilience. He couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy, knowing that many of these people struggled daily just to survive. After some searching, Hader found the area where Afzal was rumored to have lived. But when he arrived, he was met with an eerie silence. Afzal's small home stood empty, its windows shuttered, and there was no sign of life inside. The neighbors he approached were hesitant to speak, their faces etched with apprehension. Eventually, one elderly woman, watching Hader with wary eyes, agreed to talk. Afzal was a quiet man, she said, her voice low. He kept to himself, and he had a family. But 2 weeks ago, he died in a car accident on his way home. She paused, glancing around nervously. At least, that's what they say. Hader's brow furrowed. Who told you about the accident? The woman shrugged, looking uncomfortable. No one saw his body. His family left soon after, without saying a word to anyone. It's like they vanished overnight. A chill ran down Hader's spine. This didn't feel like a simple accident. It seemed too convenient, as if someone had wanted Afzal and his family to disappear. The timing was suspicious, aligning too perfectly with the days after the rally incident. Do you know where his family went? Hader pressed. The woman shook her head. No one knows. They just left. It's as if they were never here. She hesitated, looking at Hader with a mix of fear and caution. Be careful, Sahib. Afzal is just a juice seller, but sometimes people like him know things they're not supposed to. And people like you, people who ask questions, they can get into trouble. Hader thanked the woman, her warning echoing in his mind as he left the slum. He now had a sinking feeling that Afzal's disappearance was orchestrated, part of a larger cover-up meant to bury the truth. He was certain that whoever had set up Assad and his friends had also silenced Afzal to prevent any leaks. Piecing together the puzzle, back at his home, Hader reviewed everything he had learned so far. The juice stand's sudden removal, Afzal's supposed accident, and his family's disappearance all pointed to a calculated effort to erase evidence. He couldn't ignore the conclusion forming in his mind. Powerful forces were working to keep this case buried, and they were willing to eliminate anyone who got too close to the truth. Hader knew that pursuing this line of inquiry could be dangerous, but he was willing to take the risk. His instincts told him that finding out what had happened to Afzal was the key to proving Assad's innocence. With renewed determination, Hader decided to reach out to people who might have access to information about Afzal's disappearance. A secret meeting with a former police contact Hader's years as a doctor had allowed him to form connections with people from all walks of life, including law enforcement. He contacted a former police officer he trusted, someone who had since retired but still had connections within the Islamabad police force. They agreed to meet in a discreet location, away from prying eyes. Over tea in a small, dimly lit cafe, Hader explained the situation, careful to keep the conversation vague. His friend listened intently, his face a mask of concern as Hader recounted Afzal's disappearance and the strange circumstances surrounding his supposed accident. I need to know if there's any record of Afzal's death, Hader said. An accident report, a death certificate, anything. The former officer nodded slowly, choosing his words carefully. You're playing a dangerous game, Hader, but I'll see what I can find. Give me a few days. The breakthrough. A dark discovery. 3 days later, Hader's contact returned with unsettling news. They met once again in the same cafe, and the retired officer's expression was grim. "There's no official record of Afzal's death," he said quietly. "No accident report, no death certificate. According to the official records, he doesn't exist." Haider felt a surge of anger and fear. Someone had gone to great lengths to erase Afzal's existence, and it was clear that this was no ordinary cover-up. The pieces were falling into place, confirming Haider's suspicions that Afzal had been eliminated because he was a key witness to the setup. "Do you have any idea who could be behind this?" Haider asked, though he already had a sense of the answer. The former officer leaned closer, lowering his voice. "This goes higher than local law enforcement. There are whispers, powerful people involved in political manipulation. You need to be very careful, Haider. The forces at play here won't hesitate to silence anyone who threatens their agenda." Haider thanked his friend, feeling a newfound sense of urgency. He now had confirmation that the conspiracy was real, orchestrated by people with the power to erase lives and fabricate narratives. But despite the danger, he knew he couldn't back down. Assad and his friends were innocent, and it was up to him to prove it. Revealing the truth to Noman, that evening, Haider met with attorney Noman, who was working tirelessly to prepare for the upcoming trial. Noman's eyes were filled with exhaustion, but he listened intently as Haider shared the findings about Afzal's disappearance and the fabricated accident. Afzal was the key, Haider concluded. He could have testified that Assad and the others left their bags at his stand for just a few moments. But now he's gone, erased. This isn't just a case of wrongful arrest. It's an intentional setup by powerful players. Noman's face hardened, a spark of determination lighting up his tired features. "This is worse than I thought. But knowing this, we can shift our strategy. We'll challenge the legitimacy of the evidence, expose the government's corruption, and show the court that this entire case is built on lies." Haider nodded. "But be careful, Noman. They're ruthless. They threaten my family, and I had to send them out of the country. Don't underestimate what they're capable of." Noman gave a grim smile. "I'm well aware of the stakes, but I refuse to let them win. We'll fight this case, and we'll expose the truth." Strengthening the defense. With Haider's discoveries, Noman intensified his efforts to build a defense that would cast doubt on the government's case. He arranged for private investigators to look into Afzal's disappearance further and gathered documentation on cases where similar coercion tactics had been used by the authorities. Noman also reached out to international human rights organizations, hoping to bring more attention to the case and place additional pressure on the government. Meanwhile, Haider continued his own investigation, contacting journalists and quietly spreading word of the conspiracy. He knew that publicizing the truth was dangerous, but he was determined to keep the pressure on, hoping that if enough people knew about the corruption, it would make it harder for the government to proceed without scrutiny. A message of hope for Assad and his friends. A few days before the trial, Haider managed to send a message to Assad and his friends through a sympathetic guard. He wanted them to know that they were not alone in their fight, that Noman and Haider were working day and night to expose the truth. Assad received the message in his dim cell, and as he read his cousin's words, a sense of hope washed over him. The ordeal had taken its toll on him and his friends, but knowing that Haider was risking everything to prove their innocence gave him the strength to keep fighting. Episode 11. The Price of Justice. Abandonment by Noman's legal team. As the trial date drew closer, attorney Noman and his team worked tirelessly to prepare for what would be a high-stakes, intense battle. The case had already attracted immense media attention, and pressure from powerful political forces had reached a boiling point. However, tensions within Noman's team had also been simmering. The attorneys he'd hired to support him were increasingly uncomfortable with the risks involved in representing Assad, Mafroor, Tarab, and Caleb. One evening, as they gathered in Noman's office to discuss their strategy, the tension broke. The attorneys, who had been his closest allies, approached him with somber expressions. One of them, someone Noman had trusted implicitly, stepped forward to deliver the news. "We're sorry, Noman," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "but we can't continue working on this case. We're not making enough to justify putting our families at risk." Noman's face hardened. What do you mean? The attorney glanced around at the others, who nodded in agreement. Powerful people have reached out to us, Noman. They've made it clear that if we don't back out, they'll come after our families. We can't put our lives on the line, not for this. Though Noman tried to argue, his colleagues were irresolute. We know what they're doing is wrong, the attorney continued, but we're not ready to die over it. Our families are more important. As Noman watched them leave, he felt a profound sense of betrayal and helplessness. He was now alone, left to fight an uphill battle against a corrupt system without the support he had once counted on. A desperate motion and denied request. Realizing he was left without a team, Noman did the only thing he could. He filed a motion with the court, requesting an extension on the trial date to give himself more time to prepare. He argued that recent developments in the case had significantly altered the scope of his defense, and he needed additional time to investigate and gather evidence. However, the court, which had shown its bias time and again, denied his motion. The judge stated that the time given had been sufficient and that delaying the trial was unnecessary. Noman's heart sank. He knew the court's decision was yet another indication of the forces working against him. Noman's last gamble, a risky plan. Feeling cornered, Noman decided to take a bold and risky step. He needed to create enough disruption to force the government's hand. He decided to leak a story to the media, claiming he had tracked down Afzal, the missing juice stand owner, and that Afzal was prepared to testify, providing evidence that would expose the entire conspiracy. Noman knew that the mere idea of Afzal's testimony would send shockwaves through the people behind the setup. He spoke to a trusted journalist who published the story, and the news spread quickly. Within days, media outlets were buzzing with the revelation, speculating about who might be implicated if Afzal's testimony came to light. The people orchestrating the case were thrown into a panic. For the first time, Noman felt he had shifted the power dynamic, buying himself and his clients some breathing room. But this victory was short-lived. The tragic murder of Noman, just days after the story broke, Noman's life was cruelly cut short. Late one evening, unknown assailants entered his home, overpowering him. They forced him to write a suicide note, stating that he could no longer bear the weight of defending guilty clients and that he was ending his life out of shame for misleading the public. In the morning, the news reported that Noman had taken his own life, but those who knew him sensed the truth immediately. His family, friends, and especially his clients' families were devastated by the loss. The defendants' families, especially Haider, saw through the fabricated story. They knew Noman would never have given up on the case, and the so-called suicide note was a blatant attempt by powerful forces to silence him permanently. The news left Haider and the families in shock and despair. Noman had been their last hope, the one person brave enough to stand up against the corruption they were facing. Now, with Noman gone, it seemed impossible to find an attorney willing to take on the case. The families were gripped by fear, knowing they were running out of time. Desperate search for representation. With the trial looming just 5 days away, Haider and the families desperately sought another attorney. But each lawyer they approached refused, citing the dangers associated with the case. The loss of Noman had sent a powerful message, warning others that defending Assad and his friends came with dire consequences. Just when they were on the brink of despair, an elderly attorney named Qasim, who had recently retired, stepped forward. He was in his late 60s, a seasoned lawyer with a reputation for integrity, though he hadn't worked on a case of this scale in years. Qasim was aware of the risks but agreed to take the case, knowing that without him, Assad and his friends would face the trial unrepresented, with only a court-appointed lawyer to defend them. Haider met with Qasim and found him compassionate, but slow in his thought process. Despite his advanced age and occasional memory lapses, Qasim was committed to helping, determined to do what he could to provide Assad and his friends with a fair defense.